Most people think communication is about saying the right words. But what if the real problem isn't what we say? It's what's happening inside of us before we even open our mouth. My guest today understands communication in a way that few people do. He's worked with CEOs, their teams, sales teams, and leaders who already have the title, but struggle to create clarity, trust, influence, especially when it matters the most. His work isn't based upon scripts or surface level techniques. It's rooted in neuroscience, how the brain processes fear, confidence, pressure, and connection. But what makes today's conversation different, where that expertise comes from, is this is somebody who has communicated in the middle of a crisis, serving the people in Ukraine, in uncertainty and trauma, where this is real, not theoretical. And someone who had to find their voice when coming to the United States as a gifted music teacher, navigating culture and identity and belonging, and somebody who had to learn how the brain works through music, working with child prodigy musicians and teaching himself the drums and piano in record time, discovering how rhythm and emotion and timing shape performance. Today, we're going to talk about communication as a leadership skill, communication under pressure, and what it really takes to speak with clarity, confidence, and authority, especially when the stakes are high. I am thrilled to welcome my good friend, Christopher Lincoln, founder of NeuroSpeak and communication coach who helps leaders transform not just how they speak, but how they show up. Chris, welcome to Speaking with Authority.
Thanks, Jim. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you for that awesome intro.
My pleasure. Let's get right into it, Chris. I want to kind of frame this,
Sure.
from a big frame, thinking about neuroscience and communication. And you approach communication through neuroscience. Why
Yes.
does understanding how the brain works matter more than learning better words or techniques?
Understanding the neuroscience is key because it's universal to us as a human species. So once you understand the type of neurochemistry that you can create in yourself and in your audience through communication, through speaking or presenting, you become a much more effective speaker because you can induce things like dopamine to create engagement rather than the question being, how do I write specific words that are going to create the engagement, or how do I write specific words that are going to create a connection and get people to trust me, or how do I write certain words to make me come across as confident? You can leverage what we understand about neuroscience and certain biochemicals to create that very quickly in yourself, but also in your audience when you're speaking, and it impacts the words that you can write, but it also impacts the way you come across to people. And I think that's probably the crucial component here, is that it adjusts the mindset so that your behaviors naturally demonstrate that confidence, that trustable type of person, and that person who's worth engaging with, worth listening to. So understanding that as a foundation and as a principle completely transforms the way that you write. But also, if you were to just go on stage or start speaking, you would do it in a way that is highly effective versus on relying on this perfect scripted presentation or speech.
See, I love that. That's one of the things when I was over there, we had dinner in London. It was great seeing you when I was over there I think it was before I was doing the TED Talk. But that whole thing that I structured, and we talked about this before I went over there, it was structured as far as what are the chemistry or the chemicals that I want firing in my audience's brain. How do I bring dopamine in? How do I bring oxytocin in? How do I bring serotonin in? How do I bring endorphins? How do I bring a little bit of a suspense, a little bit of norepinephrine, a little bit of cortisol to build the suspense as what's going to happen? And it creates dopamine and all this other stuff. And it was so amazing because all of these world-class speakers said to me, oh my gosh, you had everyone on the edge of their seats. And I think that's so important to understand the neuroscience and how we communicate. Now, let me ask you a little bit about the emotional reality here. Why do people lose clarity under pressure? When the pressure is really high, even when we know exactly what we want to say. So talk a little bit about that. What happens there when somebody's trying to communicate and it just is not coming out the way that they want to? What's going on with the brain chemistry there?
Yes, the first thing I'd say what is happening there is your mindset and the thoughts that you're having. Usually things like, what if I get this wrong? What if I forget this important point? Or what if people don't think I'm good enough or smart enough? That kind of thought process will induce cortisol, which is the chemical that we associate with stress. The funny thing about this is that once you have high spikes in cortisol, it decreases your capability of accessing memory. So it actually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're questioning yourself on, will you remember this and will you get that point in and will you say something with clarity, as you say, Jim, because you have less access to that part of the brain that empowers those things.
And so as a leader, a lot of times I will see a leader not meaning to, but they'll start asking questions and they create cortisol in their underlings or the people that they're trying to question. And that person locks up. They're in a tense moment. The cortisol has flooded the prefrontal cortex. And then it's kind of an awkward dance that starts happening because the leader will start asking more questions, which fills up with more cortisol, and the person actually goes blank.
Yes.
Tell me, how can a leader be sensitive to that cortisol factor that they're creating in somebody else and bring that piece down so that they don't flood their person they have to question with cortisol?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is thinking about your approach and in being intentional with the atmosphere that you want to create in that room. And in some cases, cortisol, a little bit of cortisol can be a good thing. So a slightly different approach might be, okay, we have this very pressing issue to figure out. What can we do in the next 60 minutes to put together a solution for us to do this? Or in the next 5 minutes, let's brainstorm for 5 minutes what we think the top 3 things are that we can do to address this issue. So because there's that time pressure, it can awaken you. It can give you a bit of focus and a bit more drive to address the issue. But there's a sense of collaboration there. Whereas if you're inducing cortisol or you're stressing your people out, then you're actually locking them down from being able to give you any useful answers. So I think the first thing is have the intention in mind of what you want to create in that room. But the second thing is, if you're doing it without realizing, is to try and see in your audience how they are responding to you. If you have a conversation, so you've got like a meeting room scenario, if you can see the full white in their eyes and they're looking a bit like this, they're sweating, they're tense, they are breathing quickly, some of these non-verbals that might tell you that actually they are a little too on edge to be helpful, then maybe take a step back and address that and say, I think maybe we might be feeling a little bit tense here. So let's try something different and label it. Label that you've created the tension. And then people go like, oh, thank God he recognizes or she recognizes what's going on here. At least that's the situation. Now we can move forward. Yeah.
I like that. So let me ask you this. Why does fear of conflict, of rejection, of looking incompetent, hijack communication so quickly? Why does fear hijack it?
Because fear is instinctive. well, it's an emotion that is created from an instinct, which happens in less than a second, and a lot less than a second, actually, as we are scanning for threats. And if there is a threat to us socially, we will pick that up very quickly, and that our brains will focus on that far more than anything logical about the situation. So you're then inducing the cortisol and then potentially inducing adrenaline, which is essentially the neurochemical for, let me get the hell out of here because there's a saber-toothed tiger trying to get me. So it's a defense mechanism that is part of our instinctive process, which overrides any emotion or logic. And we have to address that first before we can be logical about how to move forward.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. Now, why do you think smart, experienced leaders often communicate in ways that actually increase tension instead of reducing it?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Jim?
So, we've got smart, experienced leaders, and they communicate in a way that actually increases tension instead of lowering it. So a leader has a team or a group and everything else, and they're increasing tension instead of reducing it.
Yeah, I like to think about the charisma zone in this perspective, and I learned about this from a lady called Vanessa Van Edwards, who I'm being coached by at the moment, actually. And there was a study done to look at charisma specifically, and what it found was there are these two components that make up someone who's charismatic. So if you imagine one axis is competence, which is what you're talking about, is someone being very competent, very intelligent. The other axis is warmth. And so you need to be over here where you are as warm as you are competent. The warmth and the competence make you charismatic because people see you as smart, reliable, and trusting. But the warmth makes you approachable, supportive, connected to them as a human being. And so where I think it can go wrong is people are so focused on one element or the other, whether it be competence or warmth. So in the scenario where you're overly competent, you focus on having all of the facts, but your delivery of that information, it might be a little bit intimidating, like you're a know-it-all, and this is how it's going to be because this is the smartest outcome. And it might be the smartest outcome, but because people are intimidated by you, they might not be as influenced to follow you. Whereas the other side of it is if you're too warm, those types of people tend to be people pleasers and say yes, and they're not very good at setting boundaries. I'd say that I used to be far too much on the warm side than the competence side. And so what happens with that is that people like being around you, but they don't necessarily respect you enough as a leader to believe in the things that you say or go to you for advice that might advance them in their career or in personal and professional growth. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both areas. But what you're talking about there, Jim, is if someone is overly competent but not warm enough, then people might not connect with the message as much, or they might believe in it, but they won't follow you down that path.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because a lot of times when different personality types, somebody will look at you as competent and credible, but when it comes to chemistry and character, they don't see it there. So somebody might have great chemistry and character, but they don't have the competence and credibility. And so we're wired usually one side or another, and we're trying to always balance that. And that's what I think is brilliant about your warmth and your competency. The graph fleshes out. I like that.
It makes it very simple and very easy to think about is, am I being too competent here or am I being too warm here? So maybe I need to turn the dial on the competence or turn the dial on the warmth. And the good thing is that you can almost reverse engineer this a little bit, because if you are speaking with someone and you're seeing that they are a very warm person, very versus a competent person, then you can tweak it for them and be a bit more
Mm-hmm.
warmer, because you know that's a language that works more effectively for them. But if you have a leader who's like, just give me the stats,
Yep.
give me the logic behind this, give me the direction in concise, clear terms, then you need to turn your competency up a little bit instead.
I like that. Let me take another question and give it to you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the nervous system.
Mm.
So why is communication really a nervous system issue before it is a language issue?
Well, the body, the brain, the stomach, all of our internal makeup is so connected. And so movement, for example, has an impact on the way that you feel. There's some studies that show that if you smile, it will make you feel happier. So if you're struggling with confidence, for example, you can start to take up a bit more space, make your gestures a bit bigger, a bit wider.
Mm-hmm.
That will then have an impact on the way that you feel and what you're thinking about. So that is crucial. And actually, it's part of my own preparation exercises to do some of this that impacts the nervous system to make me a better speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Same as with your breathing. Breathing is so important that impacts the nervous system. You're lowering your heart rate and your beats per minute to very low will help you think more clearly, access your language more effectively, and make clearer points. So that's why I think that I hope answers your question there, Jim.
I think that does. Let's flesh that out a little bit. So you've got two people that get on stage in front of people. One is very nervous and one is completely calm. Giving the same message, why does the person who can control their nerves and have a calm present have a greater efficacy than the person that you're picking up on little nervousness? Why is that person more effective?
I think it's going to be a ton of reasons why. I think that the first is you're going to be showing signals to your audience that something's not right, which is going to make them think something's not right about the way I feel about this speaker. I'm trusting them less. Maybe they're not as competent. Maybe they're not as prepared. Whatever it is, there's something wrong here. And so they're instinctively thinking, is there something to be concerned about? Whereas if someone's calm, then the audience is not distracted by the nervousness. They are engaged and captivated by what the speaker is talking about.
This is good.
No worries.
So when somebody feels themselves getting reactive or defensive, what's the first thing that they need to pay attention to internally before they say anything?
Tension is one thing that you'll feel in your muscles. The second thing will be your breathing patterns. So I like to check in on my breathing. The third is how quickly am I speaking and how loud am I speaking? So if your muscles are really tense and tight and you're speaking quickly and you're speaking loudly and you're breathing quickly, those are 4 symptoms that might tell you that you're not being effective in your communication and it's time to address those issues. So slowing down your breath will really help with that. So just taking in a deep breath in the nose and then exhale with the belly, a few of those, and then some movement. I'd recommend a little bit of movement. So you might just move to the side, you might just walk to the other part of the room, will help reset and recalibrate. And then I would say you would then need to really listen to what they're saying rather than what your own thoughts are saying.
Good. I like that. Let's change some of my questioning a little bit. I'm going to change it a little bit. I want
Okay.
people to understand some of these wonderful stories that you've given me. The first
Mm,
one is, let's talk about going over to Ukraine.
mm.
So, when was that the time that you went over there? How far along were they in the war?
So that was January last year.
Okay, January last year.
Yes.
So you're heading over to Ukraine, and
Mm.
you're in a perfectly safe environment with your family. And how old are your kids now?
So I've got one boy and he's
One boy,
5 years old now.
5 years old.
Yes.
Okay,
He
so
was 3 at the time that I went over.
okay, so your boy is 3 at the time that you're going over. You've got a nice family, you've got a good job and everything else, but you feel pulled to go
Mm.
over to Ukraine in a war zone. What sparked that? What made you want to go do that?
Being a father changed my life dramatically, as I'm sure it has for most fathers. I started to see things that were happening over there.
Hmm.
And I've always been very supportive of what charities do.
Hmm.
And I've worked with charities for several years now. I love working with charities. So I'm exposed to a lot of the work that they do and the incredible change that they're able to make. I saw what was happening in Ukraine and I just had this thought, what if that was here? What if that was my family, my home, and my situation? Wouldn't I want someone to come over here and help?
Mm.
And it was a very quick answer for me. It was like, absolutely, yes, I would definitely want all the help that I can get. And then it occurred to me that I could do what I normally do, which is donate to the charity. But then I thought, well, yeah, you could probably hear my dog barking.
Hmm. A little bit.
Okay. Okay. We got Tesco's delivery. All right.
That happens.
I'll go from
So
where I said, go
yeah,
on.
so you've made the decision. You're going to actually go over to Ukraine. You're going to go over to Ukraine. You're going to help out for what, a couple weeks, or how long were you over there?
So initially, I thought I'd go over for a few days
Okay.
to help, whatever I could do. When the charity phoned me up, they said, Chris, you're going to need to come over there for a little more than a few days. It's going to take you a while to travel to Ukraine and around Ukraine.
Hmm.
And they wanted me in the east, which is where the bombings all were. So I agreed that I wanted to do that and I wanted to help. So they said to me they needed me to be there for at least a week. 2 would be optimal. And I said,
Okay.
okay, I'll see what I can do to make that happen. Then had the conversation at home,
Well, tell me about
which
that
was very,
conversation. Tell me about your wife. What did she say? How did you tell me about that conversation?
the conversation was a very difficult conversation. She didn't want me to go. She felt that it was quite dangerous, obviously, and that I could be leaving her and my son behind and not coming back.
Hmm.
I understood and I heard that, and she could see in my eyes that this was something that was really important to me, and that I felt that there's every man in this country who has kids is in that situation where they could have that as their reason for not going to help. And if everyone does feel that way, then that will lower the amount of people who go over there and help. And I
Hmm.
explained to her that there has to be some people who are willing to make a sacrifice and to take a lot of risk to do what I think is the right thing to do. And that was to go out and help people in Ukraine. And I said, there's families just like us. There's little boys out there just like our son that need help. And I can help them. And I really want to help them. And she understood that. And I had to explain a similar thing with my son
Yeah,
because he was
explain that.
born.
Yeah, tell
It
me,
was
how do you explain that to a 3-year-old?
Yeah, so he was born 2 weeks before lockdown. So I became a father and a stay-at-home worker at the same time.
Mm.
So that completely changed my world. I hadn't been away from him for longer than 24 hours. And then I realized that I had to have an open and honest and difficult conversation with him about the fact that I was going to be away for 2 weeks, because he would notice. There's no way he wouldn't notice. I was his role model, was his hero. He loved me. He followed me everywhere, Jim. And I loved that. But so I simply called him over. I said, come over here. I want to tell you something. And I went down to his level and I looked him in the eyes and I said to him that I was going to be going away for a while, and that it meant that I wouldn't be around for story time. I wouldn't be there to play with toys. I wouldn't be there to hang out with him as much for a while. And of course, he got upset and he got very sad. And then he asked me why. And I took a deep breath, as I advise in those scenarios. I said to him the honest truth, which was, well, there are little boys and little girls just like you who don't have that story time or don't have toys to play with, and really need help, and I want to go and help them. And then he smiled, which completely surprised me, because I told him something that I thought was going to make him very sad. But he smiled and then said the most amazing thing. He said, can I give them some toys? And I was like, wow, yeah, of course. And he scurried into his room and started searching and came out with these 2 little toys. And he said, can I give these to them? And I said, yeah, of course, man. And he packed them in my suitcase 2 days before I flew out. No, I did something amazing, Jim. I took photos of him with these toys, packing them into my suitcase. And then while I was in Ukraine, I met lots of children, lots of families, all struggling. The smiles on their faces, on these 2 kids' faces, when I gave them the toys that my son had donated to these children in Ukraine, was amazing. And I took a photo on my phone and I sent the photos back to him so he could see the impact that he had had on these children in Ukraine.
Oh, wow. That's an amazing story. And you were, I mean, you were serving what over there when you were working. I mean, you're actually doing a lot of work. Tell me what a day was like over there when you were working over there, as far as what you were doing.
It was incredibly hard, manual, cold work. I would wake up at about 6 in the morning. We'd be given a location of the settlement site or area that we'd be going to. So that wasn't shared until maybe 30 minutes before we actually drove the trucks out to the location, because the fear was that the locations could be intercepted. So we had to be very careful with sharing locations. So we would get a location texted to us, and then we would go outside. It was minus 21 degrees Celsius. We would dig the trucks out of the snow with shovels, and we would get in the trucks and we would drive to the location to put into Google Maps, and we'd have walkie-talkies to communicate with the other trucks and make sure no one was getting lost and that everyone was okay. And then we would turn up to the location. We would park the trucks up, and we would get up the trucks and start to offload the tables. We would set up the tables, and then we would unpack all of the pizzas, put them onto the tables. We would clean the pizza ovens, make sure they were all ready, fire them up. We would put music on, and then people would just show up. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of Ukrainians would show up, and we would just, pizza after pizza, just put them in the oven, take them out, slice them up, hand them to someone else. They would go and take it to the counter, and then we'd serve these pizzas, and we would just continuously cook these pizzas and serve them for around 6-7 hours, depending on A, we ran out of pizzas, B, the people stopped coming, or C, it got too late. And then this was incredibly cold at the time. And then after we'd finish, we would clean the pizza ovens, scrape them down. That was one of the most horrible parts of it, believe it or not. You get black soot all over your hands, freezing cold, fiery pizza ovens the whole time. And there were war sirens going off every couple of hours as well. You would be cooking, and then all of a sudden you'd hear a siren go off that went across the entire region, sometimes the entire country. Everyone would get their phone out and open an app called Air Alert. You can go to the App Store and you can download that. It's still available. You can still see which areas of Ukraine are currently under attack right now. And you would see if your area is at threat. And I remember this one time where alarm went off and we opened it up and there was a aircraft loaded with cruise missiles heading towards where we were cooking at the time. And I remember that moment thinking how real this situation of warfare really was, and how likely it could be that I could be seriously injured or even killed, or other people in Ukraine could be hurt. And I remember thinking, wow, this is every day for these people. This is a blink of an eye compared to what these people in Ukraine are going through every single day. So that was what we went through every day. There was never a day where there was not an attack while we were there. There were multiple attacks every single day, multiple threats, drones.
Where did you
missiles,
sleep?
Artillery fire. So we stayed in a shared apartment.
Okay.
So through donations that we got to the charity, we paid rent for an apartment where we all slept on the floor in sleeping bags. And then, we would stay in those apartments and then rotate the volunteers. So new volunteers would come, we'd introduce them, say hello, show them the ropes. I was training people by my second day on how to use the pizza ovens and things like that. And then, you would go home and people would take your place, and you'd have about 8 people often staying in these apartments. And we had apartments all over. And if we didn't have an apartment in that particular location, we'd use supporter donations to book a hotel or motel in the particular area where we were working in.
So with bomb threats going on and all of this other stuff, the communication, you're in a crisis, a constant crisis situation. How did that help you with, thinking about communication in a crisis situation? Because you had to get people to, all right, you can't be by the windows when the bomb goes off,
Yeah.
People had to communicate in a calm, methodical way, not to bring fear to new people over there, but to just give them the reality. So as far as the neuroscience of communication in that environment, talk to me about that.
I was really inspired by the leadership over there while I was there because of how calm they were in that situation. They treated it like their second home. It wasn't like, okay, we could be bombed tomorrow, so we have to be really careful and we really worried all the time. We treated it like this was just everyday life, and we got comfortable with it very quickly. I mean, you can only get so comfortable in that scenario. There's no doubt in my mind that the fear was incredibly real when the sirens went off and when you heard booms and things like that. But in terms of the conversations and the communication, we took care of each other. I'd say that we led with empathy first. We were always really supportive and had this real atmosphere of you're part of the family. We would make each other coffee. We would make sure no one's hungry. We'd check in every now and again. Some days I'd be cooking pizzas for hours on end, and occasionally one of the volunteers would come and bring me a slice of pizza. And they wouldn't even need to say anything. It was just like they could see that I was working so hard and that I hadn't eaten. And they'd noticed, come over and say, Chris, you need something to eat. You've been going at it for hours. It's that kind of really noticing what's going on with people and putting their emotions first and being very grounded and very real about the situation, having a lot of empathy, as I said, just lots of support. You had to be supportive because of the nature of the situation. I think if there was any leadership over there that was very stern or assertive, that it would, in fact, actually, there was one gentleman who was like that, and he was not listened to because of that, actually. So trying to be someone who people trust and feel comfortable around was really important.
Yeah.
And so when it came to my turn to training other people, I was highly influenced by that leadership themselves, by the good ones. And I thought, you can be in this situation of crisis and still create this calm, warm, supportive environment that makes people more comfortable with working in that situation, not panicking from the sirens going off. And actually, looking back on this, reflecting on this, I don't remember seeing anyone really freaking out when the sirens went off, because we trusted each other so much that no matter what happened, well, one, we wouldn't necessarily be able to control it anyway, but two, we were in good company that we could rely on each other to do the right thing and look after each other, and no one was going to get left behind.
I love that story. I mean, there's so much to that story. I'd really like to go deeper, but I only got so much time, and I want to get to, I want to get to coming to the United States. A lot of people don't realize that you are a very talented guitarist, and you were hired to come to the United States to teach music. And all of a sudden you're about ready to come over there, and you have this impression that you're going over there to teach guitar.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that changed. So set that up, talk me through that. And I just think this is a fascinating story.
Yeah, this is a really funny story. My housemate at University of Leeds said to me one day, Chris, I'm working with this company that I think you'd be really great for. And I said, okay, what is it? And she said, oh, it's this company that sends students overseas to teach them a skill, and you counsel them and you mentor them, and you could do this with guitar. And I thought, yeah, that'd be awesome. There's a company that's going to fly me over there. They're going to pay for my accommodation, my food every day, and I get to play guitar and teach kids instruments. That's the best thing in the world. Sign me up. So she introduces me to her company. They interview me, and throughout the interviews, I'm convinced that I'm applying and being interviewed for the position of a guitar teacher. I made it through, I think it was 2 interviews, and then by the 3rd interview, they let me know that it was going ahead. They were going ahead with the role. And then they started asking piano-specific questions. And I distinctly recall that before that, they had never specified the instrument. It'd always been, can you play Dylan? Can you teach an instrument? How long have you played for? Like, it was never instrument-specific questions until I was given the role. And so I said, is this for a guitar position or a piano position? And they said, oh, it's a piano position. You can play piano, right? And in my head, I thought, I'd love to play piano. So yes, I can play piano. And I had 2 weeks approximately to go away and learn piano. And I was self-taught on guitar, which is now hanging up in my office here. It's very much a symbol for much of my journey. And I thought, if I've self-taught on guitar, surely I can teach myself piano good enough to get away with this. So I had access to the recording studios and the pianos at the university because I was studying music there. And so what I did is I made a regular occurrence of turning up to the studios and playing piano for hours until, well, I had no choice. I had to fly out and go and do it. I remember thinking on the plane, oh my God, what if someone finds out that I'm not actually that good on piano and I lose my visa and I get flown back home and I'm banished from America or something like that? That'd be awful. I get there and I'm teaching kids on piano for like 7 hours a day. Like lots of time to play, lots of time to let them play.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also making sure that I turned up early to give myself extra time. And within a couple of weeks, I was good enough, Jim, that no one would have asked any questions. No one would have realized that I couldn't play piano before this interview had happened. So I managed through teaching it to get good enough at it to teach it, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
I do remember, though, there was this one kid who was insane on the piano, and he started doing this crazy, I think it was a Mixolydian scale or something like that. And I was just like thinking, what am I going to do with this kid? And I said to him,
hadn't he been, under the best of the best teachers, and he'd already had, he'd had some of the best teachers in the world getting him to this next level, and now you're there and you're
yeah, now they've got me. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Some of these kids, it was a very expensive summer camp for these kids to go to. And some of these kids were classically trained by the best of the best. And you could tell they were just like virtuosos. They were born stars. Like, these kids were so talented. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do with some of these kids? And there's one particular kid, I asked him if he'd ever written a song. And he was like, composed my own piece. No, I have to follow the score from beginning to end and practice and rehearse and do these scales. I thought, okay, that's where I can help you. And I said, today we're going to learn how to write a song. And he just, big smile, face lit up like a Christmas tree, and was so excited about the freedom of doing whatever he wanted. So I was like, let's do a verse, and then we're going to create a chorus, and we're going to play this song that you've created. And he'd never had this opportunity. So I managed to do something that was actually helpful to him, but also got me out of a sticky jam in that particular scenario. And then funnily enough, the second time round, the second year that I got invited, I applied really late. And then they asked me, they said to me, we've only got drummer positions available. We know you can play multiple instruments. Can you play drums and teach drums? And I said, yeah, of course. Same process. I was like, I'd love to learn drums. So I'm just going to say yes to this and then do it again. And I remember trying to delay coming over, and the recruiter was like, no, you need to come over earlier. And I was like, oh my God, I don't have much time. And what I did with drums was slightly different, because you can play an electric drum kit and it's the same as learning real drums. So what I did was I got Band Hero at uni, and I started learning all the songs on Band Hero at master level so that I could play insanely well, and I had a really good time doing that. So that by the time I went over, I could play drums and teach drums. It's absolutely nuts.
I love it. Yeah, it gives hope to everyone else who wants to learn a musical instrument.
Yeah. If I can do it, then you can do it too.
So working with the child prodigy musicians, you taught yourself the drums and the piano.
Mm.
Why does music reveal things about your brain that traditional learning doesn't? Tell me a little bit about the music in the brain, how that works.
Well, it activates audio sensory. So that pathway in the brain will light up. It also triggers a lot of emotion. And we can use this as almost a cheat code for when we're doing presenting, when we're doing speaking, and when we're communicating. If you play music when you're going on that is exciting and is elevating, then you can create that emotion without saying a word.
Wow, yeah, that's true.
But if you are telling a really dramatic story that is emotional and compassionate and maybe even quite sad, speaking of the piano, you're playing that in D minor. You have this beautiful melodic piece, maybe some strings come in as well, then you're creating that emotion already, and it amplifies the message you're trying to convey. So if you have an important presentation, you have an important speech, really important thing to do in your preparation is to select the primary emotion that you want to create. And you can choose music as a way of creating that emotion, whether it be at the beginning or whether it be in the middle or whether it be at the end, that will create that emotion really effectively. The other thing I've found, there's this scene in The King's Speech. Have you seen this movie?
Yes, yes.
And he struggles to speak. And I've tested this. If you play classical music while you're speaking, you speak more eloquently, you speak more confidently, you have this groundedness to you, and it creates the emotion that you then present when you're speaking. So you can do it for yourself in preparation as well. So if you have a story where you're thinking about, okay, I need to create more joy in this part, you can play some joyful music and then talk over it and record yourself and then listen back to it, compare it to a recording of you doing it without the music, and you'll see that you just carried yourself much more effectively in the way that you did when you did it with the music. So we know that music is highly influential on the way that we feel. And I haven't studied music psychology in a long time, but a lot of it comes down to core memories that we have when we're young, and music that we listen to around our parents and with our friends, but also through our genetics, we are hardwired to respond to rhythm and to melody. And if you can combine, or should I say, draw from melody and rhythm in the way that you speak, then that will have that effect that music will have when you're speaking. I'll give you an example. You might say something like, we do this with promise, with power, with conviction. We do this with love, with heart, with joy. See, there's like this rhythm, this melody that goes along with it, and that creates more impact than if you just said, we do this with power, with joy, with conviction. Creating that rhythm and melody just creates this engagement that is associated with the way we engage with music and with sound.
Yeah, my brain is just going off right now thinking about this because I've just finished a book. It's going to be published on the 21st. It's called Hijacked. It's on Amazon. You can get it now, but I've got to go through and I've got to narrate the book. And I want to do all the narration for Audible. And so I'm thinking about, okay, in fact, I'll send it to you. You tell me, we can talk a little bit about what music I should be playing during each chapter, or which one that I should be going through. But I'm thinking about, wow, yeah, if I'm narrating that and having that classical music in the background, I would probably do better than if I was just speaking off the cuff.
Try it. There'll be moments where it makes sense for music to be there, and there'll be moments where it wouldn't make sense.
Okay.
So that I would try and figure that out and test it. And that's the same with any speech or narration as you're doing with your Audible. is you have to experiment, and then you have to record it and then play it back and go, okay, I like that, don't like that, that needs tweaking.
Yeah.
The same with listening to music. I've found that most of the time, if I listen to music when I'm speaking, it has to be instrumental because words will be distracting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's key.
Yep.
And that you have to align it with the emotion you're trying to convey. So if you are talking about something serious, you need to find the right type of serious music that goes along with that. It's like you wouldn't listen to the circus theme song while talking about female empowerment or something like that.
The theme for Monty Python,
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. So, we've had a lot. I want to get back to kind of coaching that we've been talking about, your experiences in Ukraine, your experience with music teaching and all of that. I want to see if you found that in those experiences, have they helped you to become a better coach? And if so, how so? Your experiences in the Ukraine, your experiences with teaching music, all of these experiences you had, how does that show up in coaching? How has that benefited you as a coach?
Seeing people in situations that are incredibly challenging has opened my eyes to all kinds of challenges that people can face, struggles that people have. I've seen people who are going through incredible changes prevent them from enjoying their lives or being themselves. And seeing that, especially at a level of Ukraine, inspires me to want to continue helping people, whether it be a CEO of a company or whether it be a parent who needs to feed her child. It's being able to travel has helped open my eyes to different cultures, the way people have different expectations, different goals, different dreams. Makes me I've always been very curious. And so going to Ukraine, traveling, working with kids, seeing the impact of helping those people fuels my fire. Because it gives me purpose. Even helping my wife and my kid gives me purpose. But when I'm also helping people who are struggling with their ideas, they have these amazing ideas. They have these solutions that could change the world, literally. But they are scared to talk about it. They're scared to present the ideas. They're scared to fail. Being a small part of a supporting mechanism for them to enable them to do these incredible things gives me huge amounts of fulfillment. And I don't think that will ever change. And the more I do it, the more I want to continue doing it. So I think just people, if I was to put it down to one thing, it's just seeing people. We all have, many of us have wonderful ideas that we, for whatever reason it might be, don't have everything we need to be able to get out there and share it with the world or do the things that we need to. And having the training and the qualifications and the experience that I have at my disposal, I feel this responsibility on my shoulders to do everything I can to enable the people that I do come across by using those things. And as I said, it just gives me a huge amount of fulfillment doing it. And that is going to be something that just continues to grow for me. It's internal. It's a huge drive for me to continue to learn things, but I've been massively inspired to pass learnings on to help other people feel joy, to grow, and to do things that they thought they never could, that I always knew they could.
That's really good. Now, if you had to tell a leader or give them advice to just change one thing tomorrow that would affect their communication, is there anything that comes to mind as far as one thing that they can change as far as improving communication? A little tidbit?
Stop using PowerPoint and presentation slides as your reference point for speaking and presenting.
Very good.
It's a nightmare because I worked with this one CEO. She was a lovely person, amazing ideas. She was a professor, this CEO of this incredible healthcare company. But she used her laptop with PowerPoint as her safety blanket so that she didn't have to remember everything. It created such disruption and distraction every time she went to her laptop to go to the next slide and then read from it. So I think the thing that I would say needs to change is to prepare more effectively in a way that gives your audience something to really want to be there for.
That's good. I think that is a challenge for a lot of people, using that as a crutch. And once they're free from that crutch, it opens up all sorts of aspects. Their communication gets so much better. Even if they can start with just having a good intro and a good closing, and start, totally, instead of totally jumping off of that, it's like, okay, we're going to have an intro, we're going to have a close, and we're going to clean this up to where it's not such a big crutch for you. I really like that. That's good. Let me ask you, on your coaching, when you coach people, what is your ideal person? What is somebody who you think is an ideal client benefit from learning how to communicate from your style, from your wisdom, from your experience? How do you help somebody? What's that ideal client look like for you?
So typically people who are in C-suite, healthcare, tech, engineering, software companies, where you are usually very competent, very technical, but haven't quite optimized the way that you can communicate it and worked on those social cues, those non-verbals. And if you're presenting to lots of people, whether it be to investors, whether it be to your organization, or whether it be on stage, then that would be my ideal client to work with.
And how long do you work with them typically? How long does it take somebody to get really good at speaking, if they wanted to get really good at it? Just 2 weeks like the drums or the piano?
No, not 2 weeks. No, I was lucky enough with the piano because I'd already played guitar for years. So I was able to steal some of the concepts from that. But with speaking, it really depends on the person. But if you want to get really good at it, I think 12 months is the optimum amount of time to be coached for and to be rehearsing and to be practicing it in live scenarios so that you can continue to learn. Because I think speaking has many skill sets that you need to develop, but you can only develop them when you integrate them as habits. And so I see many good speakers, good leaders who just have these habits of doing things incorrectly. And so to replace those habits with good ones, that takes a lot of time. For different people, it takes longer periods of time. So I've worked with people for 3 months, for 6 months, and for 12 months as well.
Yeah. It's interesting, when I look at a leader who's very influential, the people working with that leader will walk through fire for that leader.
Yep.
They will climb the mountain. They'll get things done in record time. They have a better attitude at doing it. And the leader that doesn't have influence, everything that they ask their team member to do, it always gets put on the back burner. It's the bare minimum getting done. It is the antithesis of working with an influential leader. And so one of the things that I found when I was working with large software companies, and we're talking hundreds of engineers, I could speed up a project and get it done 2, 3, 4 months quicker. And we'll take something and just get it to move really, really fast. And people would say, how do you do that? And it's because I have more influence and I'm a much better communicator, and I teach the team how to communicate better. And when you're talking about, 100 engineers close to the 6-figure incomes, for all of them, speeding up a project by a month, by a couple months, that really affects the bottom line.
100%, because if you don't have those communication skills to influence other people to follow you, to believe in you, to trust in you, self-doubt or doubt in others takes a long time to overcome. And in fact, it sets you back. You become counterproductive if you're working for leaders who are not influential. You'll end up doing your own thing. That's what your teams will do. They'll end up just trying different things here and there. They won't be very productive. And when you need to change, oh my God, that's going to be even worse, right? Because people hate change. So when it comes to, okay, I'm a leader, but not influential, and I need to get them to change a lot of the things they're going to do, they're going to rebel. They are not going to listen. And some of them might even just leave. Whereas, as you say, if you have this power of influence in your communication, then people are going to be more open to that change, because they'll be looking at you thinking, okay, if they can embrace this change, I know they're someone I believe in and want to learn from and want to impress, then they're going to be much more accommodating with that change in the journey, with that shift that they need to make in their everyday working lives. Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me ask you this question.
Okay.
When you're analyzing a leader and you go through and they send a video, you ask them to do a videotape, what is the one thing that is the biggest surprise to that leader in your analysis?
That is such a good question, because this one comes up almost every time that I analyze a leader, and I call it facial flatlining. And what it is where you just maintain neutral facial expression throughout whatever it is you're saying. So if you're telling a story, for example, that's funny, or it might be sad, the face is just completely neutral. And so you're not synchronized. And the impact this has, Jim, is insurmountable, because people will have in the back of their minds something saying, I don't quite believe what they're saying, because they can't see it, their faces. And so it takes a lot of work to do this. And I think there's a really good example where, if you look at Keanu Reeves, for example, where people regarded him as quite emotionless in a variety of his roles. But then if you look at what happened with John Wick, which is easily his most successful franchise in terms of how it's critically acclaimed. I think there was like 4, maybe there's a 5th one now, but all of them were just so well received. And I think one of the reasons for this, my theory, is because he is expressing himself in the kicks, the flips, the jumps, the rolls, the gunplay. It's all authentic in what is happening throughout the story. And actually, he's got a really annoyed face throughout most of it. But it's completely synchronized with what the character should be expressing. And so with what they've done with Keanu Reeves is genius, because it's no longer a piece of his communication that is missing, it is effectively overridden through these scenes where he's in combat 90% of the time. So he's flailing around and expressing himself that way. As a speaker, you can't really get on a motorcycle with an Uzi, so you have to be effective with your facial expression. So I'd say this, whenever we do the analysis and we watch back their speaking, I always now zoom in on the face when they're telling a story or sharing something, and I ask them, are you showing in your face what you're saying? And the answer is always no, I'm not, and I can't believe how bored I look or how disinterested or neutral I look. So we end up doing a lot of work on trying to simulate the emotion and then using the muscles or practicing with the muscles to try and get the facial expression right, because we're so unpracticed with using our face because we don't see it when we're communicating. We can see our bodies moving, so I can see my hands when I'm doing this. You can hear your voice quite clearly, whether it's quiet or loud, but you can't see your face. And so I think this is one of the areas that's gone really completely overlooked.
Did you see my podcast with Roxy?
No.
So she's a facial expression expert. I mean, that she was.
Is she?
She was my coach for my TED Talk, and I've got to make that introduction to you. But
yes,
you'll
please.
get a kick out of her. Give me some advice you'd give to a CEO who wants to speak more effectively.
There are 3 things that a CEO can do to speak more effectively. The first one is to record yourself and to watch it back and see, what do I like? What do I hate? What needs tweaking? And then redo it, re-record it, and then repeat that cycle. The second thing you can do is speak to an expert who can already understand what some of those common challenges are, see your strengths and weaknesses more really effectively, and then give you that feedback and essentially accelerate that growth as rapidly as possible. And then the third thing that you can do is to look at other incredible speakers that you love to watch and see if you can figure out what it is that they are doing that you can adopt, whether it be powerful storytelling, whether it be awesome body language, whether it be making people laugh. Just look at what they're doing and see, can I do that? Can I replicate that in my own way? Those are the 3 steps I'd say that you should take if you want to improve your speaking very quickly.
I love that. Very good. Well done, my friend. So what are people's blind spots? What can't they see? What are their blind spots? Where do they need help?
The biggest blind spot that leaders have is that they think that they're already these phenomenal speakers. So here's 3 things that leaders typically think. The first is that I'm already a leader, so I must be a good speaker because I've made it this far. The second thing they might think is, well, I've done this hundreds of times. I've presented to loads of people in big audiences many times. So I've got that experience. And then the third thing that they might think is, well, I prepared this amazing content. I've spent all week putting together this incredible presentation speech that's going to blow people away. And because I worked really hard on it, it's going to be amazing. Well, here's 3 crucial realities to that situation. One is, because you are already a leader, people won't want to necessarily give you the feedback that you're not the best speaker in the world. So they're not going to go out the way. If you can open doors for them, or if you're influential, if you're on stage, if you have that level of authority, people are very scared to go up to someone, especially in something that's so vulnerable as speaking, and say, by the way, I was disengaged after the first 5 minutes. I lost interest. Or that story you told really bored me. Or that presentation really lacked credible information. I didn't see any good data, that type of thing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's easily improved. You can easily improve the way you identify and embrace a powerful mindset that will completely transform the way you speak once you know about it. And the third thing is it can be done very quickly. You can do it as quickly as 15 minutes if you prepare, but you should take time to prepare in between doing the content, preparing the content, and then going on stage. What I see leaders doing is putting all of their preparation to developing the content and then just going on stage and thinking, I have this. It's all under control. This content's amazing. I'm going to go out there. But they need to allocate time before they go on stage, after the content's ready, to get to the right mindset and develop a routine so that they can create the right neurochemistry to go on stage and give an incredible speech. And then, in some cases, the content doesn't even matter as much. But that mindset preparation is what completely distinguishes them as a better speaker than, say, the person before or the person after.
Oh, I love it. This is so good. This has been so rich. So rich. So if somebody's going to hire you, I'm going to put all the information, your website and all that below. Anything that you want to tell my audience as far as parting thoughts that you want them to know about you that I didn't get across?
No, I think we covered everything that we need to. We can certainly queue up that. How do you reach out to me? And I've got a few things here that you can just search me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or go to my website. So we could do that. So you can say, where can people learn more about my programs? If someone's listening and thinks this is what I need, what steps should they take?
Well, I will put all of those links in the description. So you can go there and have that. And it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed it immensely. And until next time, thanks for listening to Speaking with Authority.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.